This is Yogesh Prabhudesai from Kolhapur. I just hope and pray that all of you are a good picture of health. Keep distance, stay healthy. Thank you, Shilahara Heritage Services, and thank you, Mr. Dahi Sarkar, for giving me this platform to present my studies in temple architecture. And thank you, Dr. Manjari Bhanerao, for suggesting my name. Today I'm going to talk about a very unique architectural specimen that Kolhapur possesses. When it comes to Kolhapur, a lot of people think about Mahalakshmi temple, of course, which is pretty obvious, and then the Kopeshwar temple at Khidrapur. But the specimen that I'm going to talk about is so unique that I'm sure that after everything settles down, all of you are going to rush towards the site. So the site that I'm going to talk about is the monolithic temples of Palsambe. Uh, when it comes to monolithic temple tradition, we know that Maharashtra, as far as Maharashtra is concerned, we know that Kailasanatha at Verur is such a heavenly example, unique example, and one of the wonders. Parson Way monoliths are as compared to the Kailasnath of Verur. Parson Way monoliths are pretty small ones, but when it comes to time frame, they date a little back to the Kailasnath of Verur, and that is why the value of Parson Way monoliths is pretty big, you know. So I think without wasting a moment, let's start getting introduced to the Parson Way monolith. So here we are. Okay, Parson Way monoliths, an introduction to the ancient architecture in Kolhapur. Parson Way is a small remote town in the Gaganbauda Tehsil in Kolhapur district. Gaganbauda is on the threshold en route to Konkan from Kolhapur. The entire area falls under the evergreen forest type. Just about 10 kilometers before the Gaganbauda to the left is the road to Palsambe. One needs to pass the Palsambe town and enter in the deep jungles to reach the monoliths, and there, amidst a stream, are located four monolithic temples. All the temples are hewn out of laterite rocks. Now, apart from the main four monoliths, there are around 9 small-scale edicules carved on the rock surfaces. These edicules are very interesting from the study point of view. From the observations and study, it becomes clear that Parson Way is a Shaiva site, and Dr. Zamkhedkar has postulated that it could be dedicated to Pashupat Shaivas. The entire temple group is at present called as Ramling. As I said earlier, that the temples are hewn out of laterite rocks. The entire site is full of laterite, and the temples are divided by the wall of boulders. Hence, of the four temples, two are located on the lower level, while two are located on the upper level. Here in this picture, I have tried showing approximate topography and the levels. Here we can get a clear-cut idea of how the temples are located. As we get down to the stream, we come across this temple. Hence, I have labeled it as temple number 1. And just on the opposite direction to this temple, across the stream, is the temple number 2. Here, by looking at the temple, one gets an impression of a hut-like structure with thatched roof. Technically, it is called as kuta. The kuta rests upon the chatya, which is a coping or a covering part. In the facade, we see a gavaksha or gable arch resting upon two pillars. The temple has single cell and it is half open type. And at the end is a U-shaped bench that occupies the length of the cell. There is something peculiar about the temple one, and that is it has two edicules carved at very unconventional spots. One edicule is at the bottom corner in the front, while the other edicule is at the top corner in the rear part. And in the photograph to the right, you can see both the edicules. Chronologically speaking, I have labeled edicule at the bottom front as edicule 2 and the one in the top rear as edicule 1. The shikhar or superstructure of the edicule is very interesting and has complex composition. However, it certainly does not reflect the typical Dravidic composition. The edicule 1 also has a complex shikhar, and this too doesn't reflect the typical Dravida typology. Both the edicules house lingas. The lingas are on square pedestals, just like some thrones or seats, and not on the routine Vari Marga shape that we see. As I told earlier that the temple number 2 is on the other end of the stream, it is kind of miniature shala type building. A shala type building has vaulted roof as its covering and gable arches at both the ends. The Shala temple bears a Gavaksha balanced on two pillars in the facade. The Gavaksha is inornate and bears no sculpture at its center. In front of the Shala temple, in the same stone of course, is a peculiar square-shaped pit, which either could be a kunda for fire rituals or could be a socket to fix a linga for temporary worships. Earlier, the vaulted roofs were made up of timber, and hence on the top, studs were inserted in a row to keep the structure fixed. The same structure seems to have been translated in the stone medium here, and hence we can see the studs carved here. There is an edicule carved facing the open space, and in the picture towards the right, you can see that edicule. Interestingly, it is a replica of two-story shala type of building. The edicule seems to have worn out, but the studs carved on the top are visible. Until now, we saw the main temples on the lower ground. Now, to reach the upper temples, one needs to climb the boulders. The upper temples that I have labeled as 3 and 4 is on the basis of their structure and also on the first visible, first notice basis. The temple 3 is what we call a Sarvato Bhadra type, where a structure has 4 openings from all the 4 sides. The Sarvato Bhadra of Palsambe has a pillar couplet at every entrance, and each couplet bears a huge gavaksha atop. The structure is of Kuta type and has a 2-story. The top is covered by a hexagonal shape technically called as chhatra, which is again in English, a literal translation could be an umbrella. Here, in this close-up of the superstructure, we can clearly see how it reflects the secular architectural pattern translated into a temple. And here are 2 photographs trying to bring out what is meant by the Sarvatobhadra. Here, in the first photograph, we can see the opening on the other end too. That is the photograph towards the left. In the second photograph, we can see the pillar couplet and the volume of the Gavaksha. Now, adjacent to the temple 3 is the temple number 4. It is unique in all aspects when compared with rests of the three temples. This temple has an antechamber which also works as a half open type, which again technically we can call it as a Ardha Mandapa, of course. Next to the antechamber, we find the sanctum. In the end wall of the sanctum, there is a niche and a platform. Right now, there is no idol or there are no signs that there was a linga installed on that platform. Perhaps there was some idol placed on it. The antechamber has at its end a gavaksha balanced on two pillars that we can see here in this photograph. The antechamber has shafts running parallel to its length carved in the same stone that we can see here in the photograph to the right. This clearly indicates how the wooden structure has been translated into stone. And towards the left is the photograph of the pillar type that is commonly used in all the four temples. And based on the pillar structure, Dr. Zamkhedkar dated these temples to be pre-Chalukyan. Hence, we can date the Parsambe monoliths to somewhere around 6th century. Here, we can see the close-up photo of the superstructure. Here we can see the early design of Dravida typology of Shikhar. We can see two kutas placed on the corners and a Goshtha Panjar in between them. The hexagonal chhatra, that is an umbrella, is clearly visible here on the top. Here are closer photographs of kuta and panjar. Since the kuta is placed on corners, it is technically called as karna kuta, since karna means corner. The antechamber of the temple has vaulted roof, that is to say that the antechamber is of a shala type. Again, here we can see the studs carved on the top. And here in this drawing, the overall outline of the temple will be clear. Now, after having introduced with the main temples, let us have a quick look at the edicules that are carved on the boulders on the lower level. From the temple 2, the series of edicules begins. One needs to pass through a semi-dark space created by boulders to see these edicules. The superstructures of the edicules again clearly indicate the translation of architecture from secular to sacred. These superstructures show the pre-Dravidian phase of architecture, which is again a unique example in itself. Since the temples are for one reason carved in laterite and for second reason are eroded by water, they need very urgent attention. The porous laterite gives space for weed to grow, and this might in future damage the temples. Since the site is in remote area and a lot of people go there only in monsoon for the sake of water sports and to enjoy the greenery, a very handful people really know the importance of the site and the rich architectural heritage. Since there are no hotels and lodges nearby the site, people cannot stay at the site overnight. If there could be an information center along with lodging facilities built in the closer vicinity of the site, it can be a good heritage destination. And thank you. Thanks a lot. So, this was a quick introduction to the Parson Way monoliths. And I just wish, rather, I would say that Let all of us wish that this site is really well taken care of by the Archaeological Survey of India as soon as possible, because it needs a lot of attention, and it is, we can say that, the oldest monolithic specimen that Maharashtra has. So let us all hope and pray for the Palsambe monoliths to be taken well care of. And that's all. Thanks a lot. Stay safe.